Welcome back. It's sure been a busy political year. We've had a Supreme Court election, the state passing a state budget. Oh yeah, and 2024 will be even bigger for us here in Wisconsin. Here to make sense of what a crazy year it's been is Ruth Conniff, editor-in-chief of the Wisconsin Examiner, and Brandon Schulz with the Capital Group. Thank you guys both so much for being with us.
You bet.
Good to be here.
So in celebration of the Wisconsin Old Fashioned, which is poised to become the official state cocktail, I want to ask you both your political old-fashioned news here. So we'll start with the muddle. We'll start with what is the Brandon Schulz? What is the muddle? What is a story from this past year that you'd want a little bit more clarity on?
Oh, I don't know if I want the story that I don't necessarily want clarity on is the story I wish would go away so we could move on to making this drink. I think, you know, candidates need to move on and start talking about issues. And I don't think we have a solid discussion, certainly on the presidential stage, of issues, at least in the Republican primary, because Trump's saying all the garbage that he's saying. And it makes it difficult for the challengers to come up. On the Democrat side, you know, you're watching Biden's team trying to maintain some sort of, you know, presence with the president. Coming to Wisconsin's one. Vice President Harris comes again. I would love to see this next election cycle in 24 really be spent on issues, especially the presidential side. It's natural that happens on the legislative races and in the Senate race as well, but presidentially, we need to move on. These candidates need to start talking about what they're going to be doing, and whether it's Trump and Biden or, you know, Nikki Haley and Gavin Newsom, I don't care who. But really, the kind of the banter of, you know, the election was stolen and we got this, and let's move on. Let's have people talk about issues so voters can actually use that to decide.
And for the Ruth Conniff, what's the muddle there?
I think the muddle in Wisconsin is where are we with abortion rights? We were very fortunate that a Dane County judge ruled that the 1849 ban doesn't even apply to abortion. That was a big surprise to everybody. It does not put us, you know, back in pre-Roe being overturned, you know, status. And I think this is going to be a huge issue going forward. And I think people are really uneasy, especially women voters. We just saw this unbelievable news story out of Texas where Katie Cox was not allowed to deal with a problem pregnancy where her baby was dying and she was in severe health crisis. And, you know, the Attorney General really doubled down there and threatened her doctors with lawsuits and prison time if they did anything. So this is, you know, very, very nervous making for a lot of voters, a lot of women voters, and it's going to have a big impact on the next election. You mentioned Kamala Harris is coming here. That's what she's talking about. It's the anniversary of the Dobbs decision, and it's really an uneasy time for women in Wisconsin. We had a complete ban here. We don't. Currently, this case is going to be appealed. We don't know where that's going. So I think people are in a very muddled and worried state over that, and it's going to have a big impact on politics.
All right, so now we've muddled our cocktails. We now add the liquor, the good stuff. So what would be, for example, kind of the main focus, political power player that you've been watching from 2023 that we should keep our eye on in 2024?
Well, going with the same theme, I'm going to say Janet Protasiewicz because she had such a giganto win in the state Supreme Court. But more than that, it was the voters who supported her. And it was the women who came out and said, you know, this is not the Wisconsin I know. I am not okay with the way that politics are going here. It's extreme. It's, you know, limiting my freedom in a way I never imagined. And, you know, I think that that is going to be the most important issue in the next year.
Yeah, same to you.
Yeah, I think with regard to the justice on the court and the issues, it was all about money. $50 million, I don't care what the issue is. You spend $50 million, it's both sides, and they spent about 30.
Dan Kelly did not get a big bang for his buck in that.
No, he got zero bang because he wasn't a good candidate. Yeah. He was a terrible candidate, and
so it wasn't just money.
And so it was money. I mean, she would not have won had it not been for the money and it not been for here's how I'm going to rule. But in 24, I think Wisconsin, at least for now, you have a sense of what the presidential race is like, unless things change in the other states' primary. I think for now we have to wait and see what happens in the U.S. Senate race, whether Republicans can get a candidate. They've certainly tried hard to get Eric Hovde to announce in December and announce early. He's going to hold till after the first year. So after that happens, then you'll likely see some sort of domino effect. If he runs, that's one course. If he doesn't, that's another. And who knows if, you know, what kind of primary there's going to be. Because right now, most of the field is set. The field is set on congressional races. It's likely set on legislative races, although that's going to be that's going to be a run to the filing center the moment the court rules what the lines are, even if there's an appeal, because the legislature will finish by the end of February, early March. They have to file, I think it's early April is the deadline. So you have 30 days, and it's not just so much for the candidates, but it's for all the municipal clerks across the state, knowing where those lines are going to be, how they're going to put their ballots together. I mean, there's a ton of stuff that has to go on just to make the election work. But I think the last piece that we'll hear is the U.S. Senate race and who's in, and who's going to try and run against Tammy Baldwin.
Fascinating. So we have our muddle, we have our alcohol. Now we have to top that off with some soda, either sweet or sour, depending on how you like your old fashioned. I'm assuming, since you already had a little sour moment there, is there like a sweet moment from 2023 that you'd like to take into 2024 at all?
No.
Yeah.
23 was a really bizarre year with the Supreme Court race, and I think the money this time through, we've seen lots of money come in races for gubernatorial and other races. This race, though, not only the record that was set in Wisconsin, but the record that was set nationally and how much money was spent to get the majority, just tells you the value of that majority. They've now monetized the value of a majority on a Supreme Court. I don't care what the issue was. Issues in this case don't matter because of the way the money's spent. I will say, from a campaign viewpoint, strategy and all that, that was probably the most different and well-run race that I've seen. I don't agree with a lot of what they did, but if the goal was let's get elected no matter what, that's the standard now.
Right. Same thing, sweet or a sour moment that you'd like to forget.
So, well, I talked about Katie Cox. That's the sourest of the sour. But the sweet moment, I think, was seeing Wisconsin's fake electors settle, admit that they tried to subvert the will of voters. They were wrong. They were not electors. They were impersonating electors. And admit that Joe Biden won the presidency. Here we are coming to the end of his first term, and we've admitted that he's the president of the United States. I think that's an advance for Wisconsin. I don't know why Bob Spindell is still sitting on the Wisconsin Elections Commission when he has admitted to trying to subvert an election. And I also don't know why that wasn't part of the settlement. I think removing him from his role overseeing elections would make a heck of a lot of sense given his admission. But it was good to see some closure on that, all that election denying, all that nonsense about voter fraud, which is non-existent, and the idea that Trump's victory was stolen from him in Wisconsin. I mean, finally the fake electors themselves said no, we lied.
So I want to ask you both. We all know a lot of the big players, right? Governor Evers, Robin Vos. Who would be a person that you think we should keep our eye on who we don't quite know who they are?
I'm going to say Kristen Lyerly, who's an OBGYN from up in Green Bay, who's thinking about running for Congress, and who is very well-spoken, very passionate on the issue of abortion, had to stop practicing because she had some of those patients with problem pregnancies who were in really agonizing situations, and under Wisconsin law for a while there was absolutely nothing available to them in our state. She's just a powerful speaker and a really interesting person, and I think she could really make a splash, but she hasn't announced, and we haven't seen a whole lot of her yet, so that's going to be very interesting.
I think at least in the congressional delegation, and both Republicans and Democrats, there's probably only one race that has the likelihood of attention, and that's out in the 3rd District in La Crosse with Derek Van Orden, a freshman running for re-election. A couple of people have announced against him, but the fact that Brad Pfaff, the state senator, did not announce to run against him as going for his own re-election, it was a surprise because Pfaff ran a really good race last time. I mean, if you remember, Van Orden was up by 8 or 9 points and going into election week, all of a sudden his numbers started to go down, as did Ron Johnson's numbers. So voters started to come home after not being sure where to go. But that doesn't look like it's the case again. So I don't know that you're going to have a lot of new players on the scene. Certainly you have some challenge candidates. And even the candidates that we're talking about that potentially could announce to run against Senator Baldwin aren't necessarily new names, but they're at least the newest players on the block in this election cycle. Other than that, though, if Donald Trump is the nominee on the Republican side, Biden's on the Democrat side, there's nothing really new there. There's nothing new and exciting there. I think what would be interesting is whether or not the Biden campaign can redo in 2024 what they did 4 years ago, and they ran a really, really excellent strategy that they just took all the groups along the Democrat spectrum and said, we hate Donald Trump. Well, that's all that matters. forget all the issues. We hate Trump, and you have to vote against Trump. And they held every single group to that standard and won. And it was a very well, strategy was good. It was well run, well executed. I'm not certain they can do that this time. I'm not certain that the basis amongst those Democrat groups, because you see the fracturing going on right now, can generate that sort of continued passion against Trump. You know, I don't know that there's any new flash in 24 other than who the Republicans put up to run against Senator Baldwin.
Well, we'll have to wait and see.
That's right.
Brandon Schulz, Ruth Conniff, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And we'll be right back after this.